All right, Dinosaur Boy Chapter 15, Breaking In. Later that night, when I tiptoed out of my room and down to the front door, I was not surprised when 16 pounds of fluffy white rage came barreling down the stairs after me. We didn't have an alarm system in our house. Fanny, who slept at the foot of my parents' bed with one eye open, her tiny paws itching to defend her home, was more than adequate for that purpose. But I was ready for her. I whispered, standing my ground at the foot of the stairs and holding a spare tennis ball right in her line of vision. She skidded to a halt. I threw the ball down the hall toward the kitchen. When she tore after it, I quietly slipped out the front door. Then I waited, safely hidden in the darkness of the porch, and listened hard for a full minute. Nothing. No sound anywhere. My suburban Portland neighborhood was fast asleep. I shook my head as I walked down our driveway. It had been shockingly easy to escape my house, with my parents being none the wiser. I filed this information away for later use during my teenage years. My school is only 6 blocks from my house, and I made it there in record time. I felt very exposed, walking on the quiet streets alone. The streetlights felt like spotlights, and I was kind of freaked out by the sight of my own shadow. From the side, all you could see were my plates and long curve of a tail. There was nothing human-looking about my shadow silhouette at all. I was glad to finally leave the streetlights behind and duck into the relative darkness in front of the administration building. Elliot was already there. He was wearing a black ski cap, a black sweatshirt, and black sweatpants. In one hand he held a flashlight which was switched off. He looked like the dictionary definition of burglar. I was wearing my blue raincoat, modified to accommodate my plates, over plaid pajama bottoms and sneakers. It hadn't occurred to me that our midnight heist would require a change of clothes. "Where's Sylvie?" I asked him. "Not here yet," he answered, shifting his flashlight nervously from hand to hand. "Do you think she's even coming?" This was her idea, I reminded him. "Yeah, I was thinking about that on the way here." "Oh." "Oh?" I encouraged him. "How do you know she's not on Principal Mathis's side, I mean? They're both Martians, right? Maybe they're setting us up." "For what?" I asked, peering into the surrounding darkness. I didn't think for 1 minute that Sylvie was in cahoots with Principal Mathis. "Remember that Twilight Zone episode where the aliens come to Earth?" he asked. "Are you sure that only happened in one episode?" I asked, finally taking a mental inventory of all the Twilight Zones Elliot had made me watch over the years. "You know the one I'm talking about," Elliot insisted. "The one where they say they're here to help humans, and they have this giant book about how they're going to serve man?" "I guess." "It turned out to be a cookbook, Sawyer. That's all I'm saying." "Elliot," came a voice from the darkness behind him. "I already told you that Martians don't eat Earthlings." Elliot gasped dramatically and whirled around as Sylvie materialized out of the night and walked up the steps to meet us. As usual, she was wearing her orange sweatshirt, hood up. Strangely, she still looked less conspicuous than Elliot. Elliot eyed her suspiciously. "Isn't that exactly what you would say if you were planning to eat us?" he asked. Sylvie opened her mouth to respond, but I cut her off. "Why don't we concentrate on figuring out why don't we concentrate on figuring out how we're going to get inside the school?" I suggested. Sylvie motioned to the door. "It should be unlocked." It was my turn to eye her suspiciously. She shrugged. "Try it," she suggested. I reached for the door. Despite Sylvie's confident tone, I was very surprised when it opened easily. "How did you do that?" Elliot demanded of Sylvie. "This place is usually locked down like a prison." Sylvie wiggled her eyebrows at him. "A Martian never reveals her sources," she said mysteriously. "No, that's reporters," Elliot said. "Reporters never reveal their sources." "Oh," said Sylvie, looking momentarily deflated. Then she brightened. "Well, it's the same thing for Martians." She reached past me to open the door wider. I turned, intending to tell Elliot to lay off Sylvie, but I was blinded by headlights before I could get a word out. "Car!" Elliot hissed. "Hide!" Sylvie let go of the door and dove behind a pillar on the right side of the building. Elliot and I ran to hide behind the pillar on the left side. The door swung shut with an agonizingly loud click, and then there was silence. The car had the words "Viking Security" printed on the door, and a blue siren was stuck on the top of the roof. The siren was off, which I thought was a good sign, but the car was doing a slow circle of the parking lot directly in front of the administration building. I tucked myself as far back into the shelter of the pillar as I could go, being careful not to squish Elliot with my tail, while the probable events of the next day flashed before my eyes. The police! Our parents are being called. The grounding. The headline. Dinosaur hybrid caught breaking into school. Thanks to the T-Rex in New Jersey, everybody already thought dinosaur hybrids were violent. Now, thanks to me, they'd also think we have criminal tendencies. Great. The car's headlights swept over the administration building toward the door 3 times. Each time I held my breath and waited for the sound of the engine turning off and a door opening. But it never came. After the 3rd time, I heard Sylvie's loud whisper, "We're okay. The car's leaving." I looked around the pillar again, just as the car disappeared around the corner toward the faculty parking lot. The 3 of us all let out giant, relieved breaths and ran to get inside before the security guard came back. Once the door closed behind us, Elliot held up his flashlight, but I shook my head. It was even darker inside the school than it had been outside, but we couldn't risk a light. The security guard might see it, even from a distance. We used our hands to help us creep by the front desk. I breathed a sigh of relief when I felt my way past Miss Helen's empty desk. I had half expected to find her sitting there in her usual spot, glowering at us in the dark from behind her fan and her woefully out-of-date solar system model. It did occur to me that we had just proven, definitely, that Miss Helen was not, in fact, permanently attached to her desk. Too bad we wouldn't be able to tell anybody. It was easier to see once we got inside Principal Mathis's office. Her front window overlooked a large streetlight, which filled the room with a dim but welcome glow. "What exactly are we looking for?" Elliot asked, looking around hesitantly. "Anything out of the ordinary," Sylvie answered, heading straight for Principal Mathis's desk. "I'll check her laptop. You guys look everywhere else." Principal Mathis didn't have much stuff in her office, so everywhere else was just a large wooden cabinet on the back wall. Elliot and I walked up to examine it. It was huge, antique-looking wood armoire with metal details. The 2 big doors in the front had fancy handles in the shape of grinning lizards. "I don't think it's locked," Elliot said quietly, running his hand over one of the lizards and jiggling it slightly. "I think if I just pull on it—" "Careful," I admonished him. "Don't break anything." "It's too heavy to break," he informed me, tugging hard, but not budging the door one bit. He stepped back for a moment, then wrapped both hands around the left lizard head for a second attempt. The door still did not move. "Here," I stepped up next to him and grabbed the right lizard, bracing my foot against the side of the armoire for leverage. "On 3. 1, 2, 3, Elliot grunted, and we yanked in unison. The doors both swung open, and Elliot tumbled backwards. I swayed back as well, but managed to stay upright with a little help from my tail. That's why I was the one who saw Principal Mathis's head staring at me, eyeless, from the shelf inside the armoire.